This week on the Four Rivers Ag Report, the November crop report is out. How bad is it? Also, microwave versus deep fryer. Which one will kill you faster? And man versus combine. Who will win? All that and much more on the next Four Rivers Ag Report. Welcome to the Four Rivers Ag Report. I'm Fred Peralta. Well, the cold didn't kill me, and unfortunately for you, I have my voice back. Thanks for putting up with me last week. So this week, you're finally done with your field work. Things are slowing down. You're thinking of catching up on all those storage wars you've recorded, and boom, a ton of new reports come out from the USDA, forcing you to think. Luckily, I have people who do my thinking for me. So I contacted Brad Schwab from the Springfield office of the National Agricultural Statistics Service and confirmed what we already knew. There have been better years. Well, the November crop report is out, and with us is Brad Schwab of the USDA's NASS office in Springfield. And Brad, an interesting report in November, wasn't it?
That's right. You know, this was the fourth crop production report that we put out for the year. We started back in August, so now we're currently at 101 bushel statewide average for corn. That was up 3 bushels from our October forecast, and for soybeans, we're at 43 bushels per acre statewide, and that's up 4 from the October forecast. But both of those numbers are significantly below what our trend line yields averages would be for Illinois. Of course, it's all reflective of the drought that we experienced this last summer. The fact that the soybeans increased 4 bushels from last month, I think, is reflective of what we saw at the end of August with the rains from Isaac. And now that harvest is virtually complete for both corn and soybeans in the state, farmers have been able to look at their yield monitors and their scale tickets and determine factually what their yields are, and included that in the reports that they gave us for November 1 conditions.
Corn really took a hit for the East-Southeast district. We went from 145 bushel an acre to 74 bushel average. And so the drought really took effect on that crop. Not so much the soybeans. Are you seeing that across the state?
Right. Well, the soybeans was more representative as far as just referencing it to the soils that exist in those crop reporting districts. Of course, the southern crop reporting districts have poorer soils, so their historic average yields are not as strong. But I think the soybeans fared a little better this year and weathered the drought, if you will, better than what the corn did.
Does the NASS keep track of farmers who've gone corn on corn?
No, we don't ask that question on our surveys. We want to make sure that we account for double crop soybeans, but as far as the cropping practices, we do not, on these particular surveys, ask them if that particular cornfield or if their corn acres was corn on corn or if it was a rotation.
So we don't know how much of the yield loss was lost due to just the natural loss going corn on corn on corn.
Right. I mean, just anecdotally from talking to farmers, I know that the ones that are corn on corn are the ones that have really been suffering in the last 2 to 3 years with respect to their yields.
So given the November report, given the price, do you anticipate farmers changing their rotation plans at all, or do you anticipate that they'll be making sure that they alternate crops?
Well, I suspect that it started last year because there was a significant yield drag in the last 2 years of corn on corn, and even though, like I said, we're not asking that question, talking to some of the farmers around the area, I know that is the case, and they started converting this year, but the drought was just so severe in our areas that it didn't matter what you did this year. You were going to take a yield hit because of that.
So it looks to this as if this was a bad year, but could have been a whole lot worse.
That's right. I think the hybrids now that farmers are planting, if we would have compared the same climatic situation to 20, 30 years ago, their yields would have been even significantly less than what they came up with this year.
Well, thanks for keeping an eye out on this for us all season long, and we'll be talking to you when the next report comes on, okay?
That's right. Our next report, Fred, will be the final report on about January 12th of 2013. So we will not have a December update, but the final will come out in January.
Well, you have a great holiday, okay?
You too.
This week, Monica reports on the Mississippi River, William Shatner, and a farmer who harvests more than he bargained for. Monica?
Thanks, Fred. I'm Monica Becker. The USDA was probably trying to clean their desks out prior to Thanksgiving week because they came out with several reports. Fred already talked to Brad Schwab about the November U.S. crop report, but we still have the agriculture summary for the week. It shows that corn and soybeans are done, with only 1% corn and 2% beans not having been harvested yet. And because several farmers in our area have started planting winter wheat to make up for our less than stellar bean yields, we've started following these figures. Winter wheat is 98% planted and 81% emerged. It's nice to see some green out there while driving around. Now the moisture levels continue to improve. Topsoil is rated at 4% short, 87% adequate, and 9% surplus. Subsoil in our area is rated at 1% very short, 23% short, 75% adequate, and 1% surplus. It's been a long time since we could report any surplus in the subsoil category. So we're all good moisture-wise, right? Not necessarily. First of all, Hurricane Sandy is still affecting the cities on the East Coast, but the inland damage continues to cause Ohio farmers major headaches. The heavy winds and rains caused many parts of Ohio to experience stalk lodging and eardrops, and the soak fields are making for a muddy harvest. In some areas of the state, as much as 70% of the corn has yet to be harvested. Elsewhere in the Midwest, Wisconsin harvest is mostly done. And like Illinois, the yield was strangled by the drought. In fact, that is the lowest corn yield in the Badger State since 1996. The average yield per acre was 125 bushels. Should we feel too sorry for them? No way. The average bushel per acre in Illinois this year was 101. Misery loves company, but come on, Wisconsin. No one likes a show off. Even if you got your crop in and delivered to the elevator, the drought is still causing serious problems. Because of a lack of significant rainfall in the upper Mississippi Basin and a decision by the Army Corps of Engineers to adjust the flow of the Missouri River, commercial transportation on the middle Mississippi River between St. Louis and Cairo, Illinois, will not be allowed on or about December 10th. There will not be enough water to sustain a 9-foot navigation channel on the middle Mississippi. Farmers who waited somewhat impatiently to see how their revenue protection crop insurance purchases paid off in this short crop year finally have some answers. Todd Gleason has more from the University of Illinois.
Two of the federal crop insurance products are pegged in part to the price of corn and soybeans in the month of October. The CME Group's average December futures corn price for October was $7.50 a bushel and $15.39 for the November soybean futures contract average. Those numbers can be used to prefigure payments due from the purchase of RP, or Revenue Protection, crop insurance policies.
And this year for RP, it's pretty simple. You take your yield, the shortfall, and that's will be equal to what your guarantee yield is. And a simple way of doing that is taking your APH yield times the coverage level. So if you had a 200 bushel APH yield and an 85% coverage level, your guarantee yield would be 170. If you get a 150 yield, you have 20 bushel shortfall. Multiply that by 750, the harvest price. So as those yields go down, there's going to be some fairly large payments on RP.
So the crop insurance is doing exactly what it is supposed to do.
This year it's making payments on yield losses, and that's what the program was designed to do. It's designed to protect farmers against yield and revenue losses.
This year the RP product kicked in because yields were down, but the insurance is also configured to cover losses when price is down. RP is designed to cover those losses at the farm level. A different federal crop insurance product, GRIP HR, with the harvest price option, covers losses when they occur countywide. Schnittke's calculations point to GRIP HR payments across the state of Illinois for corn, less so, he says, for soybeans. For University of Illinois Extension, I'm Todd Gleason.
An assessment on Illinois fertilizer sales has been established to fund nutrient research at the state's university and improve water quality. The assessment was passed by the General Assembly and signed into law in August. The assessment is 75 cents per ton. The funds will fund research to improve the nutrient uptake and reduce nutrient losses from the agriculture community's use of fertilizer. It's not news that Thanksgiving is next week, but it is news that Illinois is at the top of the list of stupid turkey fryers. According to a study done by State Farm Insurance, Illinois is second to only Texas in the number of grease and cooking-related claims on Thanksgiving. Some tips to avoid becoming a statistic this year are never set up your deep fryer in an enclosed space or near a building, shut off the fuel source when adding the turkey to the hot oil to prevent a dangerous flare-up, make sure your turkey is properly thawed before lowering it into the pot, and never use water or ice around hot oil, and never use it to extinguish an oil fire. The story also gives us an excuse to play this.
Blinded by my hunger, I ignored safety, spat in the face of science. Turn off the flame, turn off the flame. Oh my goodness, what have I done? Oh, look at this. That is so stupid. Keep yourself, your family, and me safe from turkey fryers. So dangerous, you can't even imagine. I want a deep fried turkey. I want a moister, tastier turkey. I want a deep fried turkey. I want a moister, tastier turkey.
Bet you think there's no way to top that story. How's about this one? The Billings Gazette reports that in Yellowstone County, Idaho, a man got off a Greyhound bus from Washington, D.C. on a rest stop. The man wandered into a cornfield, had a rest, or perhaps a long, deep nap. That afternoon, the landowner began harvesting corn in the field. He drove about 50 yards when the combine shuddered. The farmer thought he had driven over a fence post, except the fence post was screaming. The combine had caught the man's clothing and sucked him into the cutter. Emergency personnel were able to dislodge the man from the equipment by manually turning the augers and blades backwards. He was cut and bruised, but his injuries were all classified as non-life-threatening. No citations were issued. The local sheriff is quoted as saying, "For this situation, the man is incredibly lucky to be alive." You think? That's it for this week. I'm Monica Becker.
I looked on the calendar, and next week, Thanksgiving is staring us in the face. So I thought I'd talk to Dave about one of my least favorite times of year, Christmas, and the decorations that we bring in from the outdoors in. And Dave, it's about Christmas tree time, isn't it?
It is. Right after that weekend after Thanksgiving, people flock to the local lots and cut your own operations, and got to get that perfect tree.
So I imagine that the trees in the lots have been cut for a while. How long do you think they've been harvested?
Well, some of them are purchased from local growers, but a lot of them come from Nova Scotia and New England states, and so a lot of those are cut in October.
So they've been cut for a month and a half already, and we're going to bring them into our house. So fresh cut may be a better option, might it?
Sure, it certainly is. You know you're getting a local fresh product. It's like when you're buying at the farmer's market in the summer with your vegetables. But if you go to the lot, you can still find a good tree.
So if you go to the lot and you find a tree you like, what do you do how to best prep it for your house?
Yeah, so you can, first of all, check it to make sure the leaves are still somewhat flexible. They don't bang it on the ground a little bit and see a lot of needles fall off, then look for another tree.
Okay.
Branches should be flexible. And then when you get that tree home, cut about an inch and a half off the bottom of it.
Okay.
Put it in a bucket of water, 5-gallon bucket for a day or so outside. It's going to absorb about a gallon and a half that first day.
Wow.
And then keep it watered. That's the really key to keeping a tree fresh in your home, is get it to absorb some water after you bring it home from the lot, and then keep the water to it. Don't let that end that you've recut ever get exposed to the air again.
Okay.
And just keep it wet.
So cut it and dump it.
Yep.
In the water.
Yeah, just keep it wet.
Okay, so if you want to cut your own, you get a much fresher tree that way. Any tips for picking out a tree at a tree farm to bring home?
Yeah, so, you know, out in the field, one thing that people should kind of keep in mind is, you know, take a yardstick with you, you know. You know, I've done this personally. You know, you think, well, that's a perfect tree.
That's a perfect tree.
Out in the field, they look a little bit smaller than they really are.
Oh.
So measure that width, especially. You know, the height is easy to estimate, but the width kind of is a fooler. So
it's like you're played at a buffet, isn't it?
That's right.
Your eyes are bigger than your.
That's right.
Okay.
Exactly. And then same thing when you, even though you're cutting it, you know it's full of water after you cut it. But again, when you bring it home, you know, cut at least a ½ an inch off the base, and again, give it a good drink of water, and then keep it wet again. And the tree stand, you know, make sure you've got a tree stand that holds a good amount of water, at least a couple quarts of water.
Okay.
That can absorb a surprising amount
and
of
check
water.
it often.
Yes, every day.
Okay.
I water my tree every day, and once it dries off, you know, you run out of water in that stand, then you got to recut it. Well, it's a little bit of a challenge once it's decorated.
My wife won't let me touch the tree
Right.
after once it's up.
Right.
So, are there certain species of trees that are better than others?
There are. The spruce are ones that they're beautiful, and a lot of people like spruce, but just keep in mind they just don't hold their needles as long as other species like fir, Douglas fir, balsam fir are going to last a little bit longer. They hold their needles. And as well as pine. You know, we use a lot of white pine and Scotch pine. So
pick a tree that's going to be around, do well in your house.
Yeah.
Keep it watered.
Yeah.
You were telling me beforehand, some people like to plant their Christmas tree afterwards.
Right. Right.
How do you do? I mean, I imagine you don't cut off the bottom.
Right. Right. That's the first step.
Okay. How do you go about trying to figure that out?
Yeah. So if you want to, you know, a lot of people families develop a tradition of planting that Christmas tree back out, buying a live Baldwin burlapped tree.
Okay.
From the nursery.
Right.
And then planting it in their yard. So if you do that, that's great. Just keep in mind that you don't want to keep that tree in your house more than 3 weeks. 2 weeks is better. So you can't put it in your house. That's the disadvantage. If you want a tree in there for a while, you know, maybe put up an artificial tree and then bring in your live tree.
Right.
And then you're going to need to put it in a big wash tub.
Right.
And put sphagnum moss around that.
Okay.
To keep that
keep the root ball
moist, you know, during the time you've got it indoors. And then just be careful with lights. Don't put lights that, you know, heat up a lot, dry out the branches, and then make sure you dig that hole before Christmas so that it's easier to dig the hole and then get it in the ground right after Christmas.
So that would be nice, except you'd have a root ball of certain height, so you don't want to make sure the tree is too tall.
Exactly.
And it's going to be heavy, so you need a couple of strong backs and weak minds to move it in and out.
Right.
But that's a really nice idea. Okay, but this is also the time of year that critters like to migrate to warm places and that sort of thing. You have this relatively young, successful tree. Don't you have a critter problem if you go plant it in January?
Well, you could, and one of them is not so little, and that's white-tailed deer. So, you know, so you put it in there, put it in December, and you want to make sure that you're, if you do have deer moving throughout your in your yard where you're planting that tree, protect it from antler rubbing. Because there's nothing worse than taking off all the branches, you know, in one night. So, and so you can put a tomato cage, kind of a structure around that tree. To get it through that first year. Deer seem to be attracted to new things in their environment. So that's one animal that you need to kind of prepare a protector tree from.
Right.
And then on the small side, voles, or they used to be called meadow mice.
Yeah, well, voles. I know, I'm familiar with voles.
And rabbits.
Right.
Both of those are going to eat the bark off those thin bark trees. And so mowing the vegetation away from around those trees, keeping it low, is going to reduce the vole population, expose them to predation. Rabbits too. So just remove the habitat, and then if necessary, you can put a cage around that tree. And if people want to learn more about protecting their home and their landscape from wildlife, they can check our University of Illinois Living with Wildlife website.
Always a good plan. And you know, so if you're smart and think things through, you can have a wonderful Christmas and a nice tree in the end. Thank you.
That's right. You're welcome.
When my daughter was in college, she once had to go to the emergency room because a notebook bit her. Well, but it turns out that school supplies may not be the most dangerous thing your college student has to face. The USDA has some mid-semester advice on food safety for college kids.
The college campus is a place of higher learning, but not all lessons happen in a lecture hall. Information on food safety is available from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and it could help students avoid sickness this semester.
Dorms typically have microwaves, and we find that students typically don't have the food safety basics to use them safely. It's really important to have these food safety basics to keep foodborne illness from ruining your semester.
The experts say to start and end with a clean oven. Remove splatters as they occur so food residue won't become dried on. And always follow the cooking instructions on the product package.
Know the wattage of your microwave oven. To find it, look on the inside of the oven door or in the owner's manual. Or you can test how long it takes to boil a glass of water. If it takes 2 minutes or less, it's a very high wattage oven, around 1100 watts. 4 minutes or longer, it's a lower wattage, around 625 watts. If your microwave's wattage is lower than the wattage recommended on the package cooking instructions, it will take longer than the instructions specify to cook the food. The higher the wattage, the faster it will cook food. And if the cooking instructions don't recommend cooking the product in the microwave, don't do it.
To safely cook food in the microwave, cover with a lid or microwave-safe plastic wrap, leaving a corner open to release steam. After reheating and a standing time, use a food thermometer.
The temperature should be 165 degrees Fahrenheit, unless otherwise stated on the label. That's the temperature that will kill any harmful bacteria if present.
If you store leftovers in the mini fridge, make sure it's 40 degrees Fahrenheit or below, and store leftovers within 2 hours of serving. For more food safety tips, visit www.fsis.usda.gov or fightback.org/cookitsafe, or ask Karen a food safety question online or from your phone. Or call the USDA's Meat and Poultry Hotline at 1-888-MP-HOTLINE. For the U.S. Department of Agriculture, I'm Pat O'Leary.
And finally, how can you tell when an animal is bored? Look for the empty potato chip bags and candy wrappers. Researchers at a university in Canada have found that minks housed in boring conditions consumed more food treats between meals and lay awake for a larger portion of the day compared to minks that live in interesting environments. How did they figure this out? They exposed minks to a variety of stimuli, including puffs of air, objects of chase, and candles. Researchers found that animals housed in homes enriched with other stimuli, such as water to wade in, consumed fewer food treats when not hungry, and did not lay awake without sleeping as much as animals housed without these stimuli. The lead author, Rebecca Mager, adds, Many people believe that farm and zoo animals in empty enclosures get bored. But since the animals can't tell us how they feel, we can only judge from seeing how motivated they are with the stimulation. Well, that may be fine for the minks, but I thought eating too much and laying awake at night was just a sign of old age. So to keep you from being bored, remember to follow us on Twitter at 4RiversAg, no spaces. You can find out what's happening in the show prep, find out what stories I'm following, or take part and tell me what you think about what's going on in the area. It's brand new and all the cool kids will be doing it. So that's it for this week. Work hard, be safe, and enjoy your friends and family this Thanksgiving. It truly is a blessing no matter how nuts they drive you. I'm Fred Peralta, and thanks for watching the 4 Rivers Ag Report.